Hello, this is Rabbi Mark Angel at the Institute for Jewish Ideas and Ideals. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We received a very interesting question concerning the recent controversies or discussions about whether or not women should be putting on tefillin. It's an interesting question for many reasons. Uh, we all agree, I believe, those who are listening to this YouTube all agree in the modern Orthodox community, that women should be finding ways of enhancing their religious involvement. This is not a question. This is something that's obvious, and we're very happy that over the course of the past 50 years, 100 years, the role of women in Orthodoxy has progressed dramatically in terms of Torah learning, in terms of observance, involvement in community, roles of leadership, etc., etc. The question of tefillin relates specifically to a ritual matter, and it's important that we pay some close attention to what the concerns are. On the one hand, there are women who feel that because men put on tefillin every day when they pray, they are somehow discriminated against by not putting on tefillin. They feel this is somehow an issue of kavod habriot, that they should, out of respect to them as human beings, they should also be able to put on tefillin. On the other side, there are many people who point to the Jewish tradition that the commandment of putting on tefillin is specifically reserved for men, and it doesn't apply to women. Women are not obligated to put on tefillin. The weight of halachic tradition, of course, is against women putting on tefillin for a variety of reasons, which we won't go into right now. However, it also should be pointed out that within halachic tradition, within the Talmud and halachic codes, we do find references to individual women who did put on tefillin, and we also find discussion about women who voluntarily take upon themselves positive commandments, which ordinarily are not incumbent upon them to fulfill. So there is a basis halachically that you can make a case in favor of women putting on tefillin. My concern is as follows. I pray every day with tefillin on weekdays, and I find it, of course, a wonderful thing to fulfill the mitzvah. But I pray on Saturday and Chol HaMoed and festivals without tefillin, and I find that I'm able to pray to God just as well. Tefillin don't make or break spirituality. On the contrary, spirituality is a matter of personal, internal development, sensitivity to what one is doing. The putting on tefillin is a separate mitzvah. It's not specifically tied to prayer. Putting on tefillin is a commandment to remember the sign between God and the Jewish people, specifically devolved upon men to put on the tefillin as a sign on their arm and on their heads. And this is a separate mitzvah. It turns out that it seems to be easier for most men who do put on tefillin to put it on during prayer services, but there are men who put it on during the rest of the day as well. However, it's not tied to prayer. Since men and women come to services in the morning, especially in yeshiva high schools, boys and girls are in the same tefillah, and the girls see the boys putting on tefillin and they're not putting on tefillin, and so they feel a little bit of a dissonance. They feel, why is it that the boys are putting it on and not them? I think the question should be evaluated from a different point of view. We should stand back from the question a moment. If we had no precedence, would anyone think that in order to pray to God or to have a relationship with God, one must tie leather straps around his or her arms or head? I don't think anyone would ever imagine that that would be so. On the contrary, one would feel that in order to pray properly, one should have a proper intention, spiritual framework. The heart should be tuned in, the mind should be tuned in. But no one would think that having leather straps on your arm or head would somehow enhance a spiritual experience. And therefore, I think people should go back to that. Namely, our purpose in prayer is not putting on tefillin or not putting on tefillin. Our purpose in prayer is devoting ourselves and relating to the Almighty. Having said that, the custom has arisen for men to put on tefillin during prayer services. It's easy for me to say women shouldn't feel offended by that they're left out, because I'm a man and I do put on tefillin. But I must say that it's problematic to me personally on various levels why women would want to put on tefillin at a service. And secondly, I think it's sociologically problematic. If one woman or girl decides to put on tefillin to show her piety, then how do the other girls or women feel? Does this create a new competitiveness in religion? I have tefillin, you don't. I'm more religious, I'm less religious. It creates a lot of extra tension. And also, it's just not necessary tension. It seems to me that if a young lady or a woman really feels that she cannot fulfill her religious obligations without putting on tefillin, and she feels this is such a spiritual and emotional thing that she must do, then let her do it at home. Let her pray privately at home and put on her tefillin and have the spiritual satisfaction she thinks she'll derive from that. Um, as I said, I'm a man, so it's easy for me to say that. And I sympathize with and understand that women, and I've spoken with them, who feel very, very strongly that they're left out of this mitzvah. And it's easy for me to say people should reframe the discussion, and I think they should. But I also understand that everyone doesn't want to or can't reframe the discussion. Nonetheless, the bottom line is, if women are not obligated to wear tefillin and they don't wear tefillin, they're doing the fine thing. There's nothing wrong with that, whatever. They could focus more intently on their prayers. They can focus more intently on their personal relationship with God without tefillin. That's really the fine way to do it. If an individual woman feels she must put on tefillin for whatever reason, I suggest she do it at home. It should not become an issue of public discussion, of public controversy. It shouldn't create a new level of religious competitiveness. Um, this is my view on it. I think that we should also have the humility to know that things tend to develop along their own lines in historical circumstances. Namely, today something may seem very offensive. In 5 years or 10 years, it may become more normative, and in 100 years, it may become usual. So I reserve judgment. I think that this thing will have to evolve in its own way. I've said my piece on the subject, and I think other people will say theirs. And I think each woman, each man, has to come to his and her own understanding of what the mitzvah of tefillin is, and really focus on their own individual spirituality and their relationship with God. Does tefillin enhance that, or is tefillin something extraneous to that particular goal? And therefore, one can judge himself and herself accordingly. I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much, and shalom, shalom, and chazak, chazak.